Well, good day, good morning, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Cluster API Provider AWS office hours on Monday, the 8th of January, 2024. Happy New Year to everyone. First meeting of the year. Just a reminder that this meeting abides by the CNCF Code of Conduct. So generally just be nice to each other and treat people how you'd like to be treated yourself. The meeting notes, the new meeting notes document has been shared in the chat window. If you could add yourself to the list of attendees. Also, if there are any agenda items you would like to discuss today, please feel free to add it to the agenda as well. We use the raise hand feature in Zoom. So if you'd like to talk, please use that so that we can make sure everyone gets a chance to speak. And if this is your first meeting, welcome firstly. We normally give chance a few seconds for people to unmute themselves and say hello if you want to. You don't have to, but feel free just to unmute and say hello. And yeah, go for it. I'll keep quiet. Go for it, Carlos.
Hey, so Carlos here. I work for SUSE. I work together with Richard, so yeah, we know each other. And I've been involved for the last few weeks in some of the other cluster API meetings and groups, but this is my first time in Kappa. So yeah, really happy to be here and happy to contribute in the future. So that's it from my side.
Welcome, Carlos. Good to see you.
Welcome.
Alrighty. Sorry, I talked over someone there. Please feel free to start again. No, cool. So I am just adding 2 PSAs. I am not well prepared for this meeting today. So there are 2 PSAs essentially that have happened since our last meeting 1 month ago. There are 2 new versions of Kappa release. There is the 2.3.1. It's got a number of bug fixes in there, so it's worth taking a look at as well. And we also released 2.2.5 as well, with a number of changes in it as well. So they're not, yes, they're not new feature releases. These are all just bug fix releases. So feel free to check those out. Someone did raise a weird issue with the 2.3.1, I think, in the channel today or yesterday about not being able to compile it. But I haven't had a chance to look at that. But yeah, new releases, go check them out. So moving on, we don't have any action items from the previous meeting, so that's good. So we can move on then to the normal agenda. And Dario, you have the first item, so floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much, Richard. And sorry for the background noise because I'm working outside of my home, so I'm in a cafe. Anyway, this is the reprise of the externally managed control plane support. I'm the core maintainer of Kamaji, which is an operator that is providing control plane as pods in a management cluster. Is pretty similar to Hypershift, if you haven't heard of that. It's pretty similar to Cosmotron, and we are looking for getting the support also on AWS, the AWS Cluster API provider. And I had a sort of review by Vince, and essentially we were complaining about adding an annotation, since with Kamaji, essentially the control plane and endpoint is going to be provided by Kamaji itself. So you can specify a cluster IP, a load balancer service, a node port, or whatever you want. But it's slightly different because in cluster API, essentially you're provisioning an application load balancer, but it's not required because otherwise, you're going to get a lot of issues because you have the application load balancer that is redirecting the traffic to the Kamaji load balancer. So a lot of noise also from the network standpoint. So what I did essentially is to rework my first implementation since we were implementing an annotation. And now essentially has been said that adding new fields to the API is not a problem because it's backward compatible. My pull request now is adding an enum value for the application load balancer type. And this enum value essentially it's a disabled one because what we are implementing with Kamaji Cluster API control plane provider is that we are going to patch the implementation, the infrastructure cluster with the control plane endpoint provided by Kamaji. And it's same approach that we did with OpenStack, Equinix, and MetalCube, and other providers I don't remember. I'm sorry, it's still Monday for me, although it's the end of the day. So yeah, it's working. It does that personally. So just wondering how can we get these merged? And if you have any question, I'm happy to answer all your questions. Thanks.
Cool. Thanks, Eric. Does anyone have any questions on this? We've put it on the milestone for the next feature release, which will be v 2.4.0, because it's a new feature. But yeah, if anyone has any comments.
By the way, I'm sorry, because essentially when we have the load balancer type disabled, essentially there is a function where we are skipping all the check of the application load balancer. And we are constantly, not constantly, but every 15 seconds or something like that. It's a magic number that I found in the code base. We are checking if the infrastructure cluster has been populated with the value provided by Kamaji. I know that this sounds not so cluster API-ish because it's slightly different. I talked also with the cluster API community, and there is not yet a proper consensus around the control plane provider. So I just stick to what we're doing with other providers. That's all, essentially.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Harry. Yeah, so I will definitely add another review for this. It won't be today, but maybe tomorrow or the next day. But it would be good to get some more eyes on this as well, especially from the reviewers and the maintainers. So yeah, if anyone has any cycles, if we could get some more eyes on this, it would be good to get this into the next release and a new release done. It's been a while since the 2.3. So as it's new year, good to get into the more of a regular release cadence for this. So yeah. One question I think we just need to look at, I know we are, so you add in a value to an enum. Just need to check on, I guess, what does Kubernetes has some weird rules around what is a backwards compatible change when it comes to enums. Just need to check that. Daniel, go for it.
Thanks. Yeah, I know that for our currently supported topologies, I guess I would call them, right? For managed, unmanaged, we have end-to-end tests. This is let's say, a slightly new topology. So I think we also test the bring your own infrastructure, or that's at least within sort of the possibility, or within the realm of possibility for testing, since it's it's just creating AWS resources out of band, right, in the test harness, let's say, itself, and then running Kappa. For this feature, where you have an externally managed control plane, do we need an end-to-end test? Do we want an end-to-end test? And if we did, how could that possibly work? It's just an open question. I'm not, yeah, that's it.
I was thinking that maybe the problem is that with Kamaji, essentially we can test it. It's pretty straightforward. But the problem is that maybe if we can try to mock this, will be much better, I think. So yeah, because the problem is that, trying to replicate the same network topology is really hard. And I saw essentially that in Kappa, there are plenty of Go mocks or something like that. We can think about that. I can work on that. Yeah. I think that mock is good enough. In the end, what we have to do is just check if we got the value populated and if everything else is working as expected.
Got it. Yeah, I think it would be, since there's Kamaji, there may be other, let's say, projects that provide this external control plane. Kappa, it would be, I mean, it would be important for the projects, but it would be important for Kappa to have some way of knowing that it's not breaking the project, right? If we're not running the end-to-end tests, or if we're not running integration tests, then yeah, something like a mock, some kind of contract that's sort of well understood, so that someone doesn't, accidentally break.
No, it makes totally sense. Don't worry. Thanks for raising this, Daniel. The end-to-end, I guess that could be maybe a problem because there is it's going to create a sort of egg chicken problem, because you have to install Kamaji, then you need to get a public IP. So maybe just integration is good enough. We're giving for granted that the control plane provider is providing the IP end of the story. So it's for granted.
Is this something that you think could be addressed in this PR, or should it be in a separate PR? Do we have any?
I'll try to do my best to get this on this PR, of course. So we are making this a sort of atomic. So
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, ideally it'd be good to have it tested in the same PR. I guess previously we have been a bit not lazy, but we've always deferred the end-to-end test to another PR. And generally we always forget about doing them, or we just don't have time to do them. Not that we don't forget about them. So yeah, ideally if it's in the same PR, that'd be good. Also appreciate time and constraints. So yeah, it's not an essential thing. Cool. Any more comments on that one? No. Cool. Thanks, Dario and Daniel, for that. That was good. So Damiano, the floor is yours now for Ignition.
Thank you, Richard. Yeah, so I would like to touch on a pull request that I am proposing related to Ignition. So just to provide a bit of context, there are two main ways in which we can bootstrap instances, like AWS instances, through Kappa. One is through Cloud Init, which is the default, and it is what things like kubeadm use by default. And then there is an alternative method, which is not the default, but is commonly used in things like Flakkar and Red Hat CoreOS and stuff like that, which is the Ignition method. So for the Cloud Init method, initially, the way in which users would provide user data, so the cloud config YAML file that then is used to bootstrap the instance was through directly the EC2 user data field that is provided by the Go SDK in AWS. And those are stored within the EC2 instance, and those are accessible through a call via the metadata instance by the user or other applications that have access to it. So basically, they are stored in clear text / plain text within the instances. So initially, this was the configuration there, and then someone proposed a change. I did some history research here in the code base. Someone proposed a change to make a bit more of a default, a stronger default in terms of security by encrypting this kind of user data before storing it within EC2 user data field. And for this purpose, they used the AWS SSM, the Security Secret Manager within AWS, where you can provide a key, encrypt data, and then store the data encrypted. So this is what the Cloud Init system uses at the moment. The controller encrypts the data through SSM and then stores them into user data. Later on, when the ignition method for bootstrapping was introduced, people were already aware of this issue. People that work on Kappa, I think it was like NVIDIA and someone. And they looked at using SSM to encrypt this data, similarly to what we're doing for Cloud Init. But then they figured out that the ignition tool does not work well with multi-part JSON that you would store within user data to then reference a key for decrypting these kind of things. So that would rule out the use of other AWS SSM within the ignition method. Then they looked at another way to make this work, and they settled on AWS S3 buckets. So at the moment, what happens within Ignition, when you choose the Ignition method to provision a Kappa instance, is that you provide a bare minimum cloud config that is stored in user data. That cloud config references within the Ignition config an S3 bucket URL. And then the S3 bucket URL is used to pull down the actual real user data to then finish the provisioning. And that bucket is ephemeral, so it's used just for the purpose of bootstrapping and then is deleted, which does not, leave traces behind like user data does, like clear text user data, which means the keys that are stored in clear text within S3, they are protected a bit more than like just laying around in the user data field, because you can give like rules to protect your bucket. And B, they are just ephemeral because they're still there for the just for the time required to do bootstrapping, and then they are deleted by the controller. So this is what the path looks like for the Ignition, which is all good and nice, but is not always compatible for all the environments. Like there are use cases where people don't necessarily have access to S3 buckets, don't necessarily have the budget for it, because they are more expensive than just storing the user data, and want to do maybe like just testing and stuff like that, and they don't necessarily have and want to faff with S3 or have S3 buckets lying around. So with this PR, I'm proposing a change where we do have a similar mechanism that we have for Cloud Init. Cloud Init by default uses AWS SSM for encryption, but then they still maintain, by they I mean, you know, the method still maintains a fallback option if you don't have like AWS SSM or you don't want to use it, and you can still store it in clear text in user data, although Ignition doesn't have this. So I would like to add the ability to fall back to plain text user data also for Ignition, similarly to what we do for Cloudinit. And yeah, this PR basically extends. So Richard, if you want to open the diff, I can show you better. If you go to the bottom, there is the docs there. And we're basically changing the API a little by introducing a new field underneath Ignition, which is called storage type, which, if not provided, defaults to the actual current only available method, which is S3. If S3 is hard-coded, then he uses S3, but then he provides an extra new method, which is like called plain text, which or user data plain text, I forgot, which basically allows you to fall back to the plain text user data for that purpose. So it's secure by default, but then if you know what you're doing, you can opt out by using the plain text user data field, which is an enum. Yeah, so that was it. Yeah, do you have any questions, thoughts, opinions?
I think it's reasonable for me. Yeah, it seems, as long as the default behavior remains as is, and that you can you have to explicitly choose the fallback. I think that's reasonable. So I'm happy with that. But yeah, it'd be good to hear other people's views as well.
Yeah, thanks. I also left everywhere I could, both in the Go doc texts, comments, and next to the documentation. I left a note everywhere saying, you know, this is not advised, it's just, you know, if you're not able to use the other methods and stuff.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable, isn't it? You know, the default is the the S3 way. If you choose to go the other way, then it's on your shoulders, that you know what you're doing. I think that's seems reasonable.
Thanks.
I guess are there any outstanding decisions, conversations on the PR?
Yeah, there is a conversation which was a follow-up that I wanted to bring up whilst the others like after the others had posed any other questions. So yeah, unless there is any comments on what I said previously, I think we can address the other comment there.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, yeah, so Joel is a teammate of mine. I asked him to review this PR. Joe was saying that plain text user data could be reworded into a different name by something like pass-through mode or something. I think in this case, Joe was thinking about pass-through being a better name because it meant like we would rule out any sort of pre-processing of user data and just, you know, straight up store it in the field without any kind of modifications. Whilst plain text user data could imply that we are doing like other sorts of pre-processing or encryption or any other change. Well, yeah, I don't know what do others think. I can you know, say what I think about it, but first you can follow up if you have any opinions on that.
I don't have a strong opinion either way, if I'm honest. Yeah, I don't. So I think probably, unless other people have really strong opinion, I'd go with what you think is best. But yeah, be good to hear what you think between the plain text user data and the pass through.
Yeah, I feel like plain text user data is a bit more explicit. Like you tell the user you are storing things in plain text within the user data field, whereas pass through, yeah, you can probably have advantages if you're applying to do some sort of processing in the middle, or stuff like that in the future. Although I think it's less clear in the current setup. Like if I read pass through, I'm like probably double thinking what that would mean or what the author would mean by that. Whereas like in this case, probably like with plain text, you get a clear understanding of like you trying to store stuff without encryption or any sort of modification. But I can see both. I can see both having like a place. I don't know.
Yeah, so yeah, I take the point is they might have encrypted it, or yeah. I'm agnostic. I see your point that plain text user data, I immediately get what that, well, I think I immediately get what that means as a user. It's a bit more obvious to me than pass through, but don't know if does anyone else have an opinion on this?
The words plain text here are just a way to communicate that it's not encrypted.
Yeah.
Okay. The sometimes text, right, can actually talk about the format. So I don't know if it's too specific, if we would be maybe happier with something like unencrypted user data, but plain text in this is also fine. But there it sounds like there might be other options too.
Yeah, we could also use unencrypted, although unencrypted probably is like the end of the spectrum on the other way of what Joe was saying. Like if pass-through is very generic and doesn't imply anything about like encryption or any sort of modification, is just like straight up copying. Plain text is like in the middle and is saying like, okay, we are not like encoding or encrypting or doing, that kind of stuff. Encryption is just binding us to, just the encryption. If we're doing any sort of other modification, just like encoding. Like if you say unencrypted, does it mean it's encoded though? Like if it's clear, like plain text is just probably like in the middle between the two. That is how I felt it. Initially, I went with user data and that's it. But then it was like, maybe we should, in the name, imply that it is, in plain text, just so people know they are a bit more aware of what's going on. And so this is how I like my thought process was. Although, yeah, I'm happy to take on changes if people feel like we can rename it. I'm happy to.
I think I hear what you're saying. So if I'm a user and I'm considering this option, I am thinking about the user data and what that's going to look like. And if plain text user data is a kind of standard terminology, then I think it's great. If there is a different way that, so you know, in the, let's say the user data, right, in the cloud init, I don't know. I mean, I guess this is not really cloud init. Well, it's not being consumed by cloud init, but we're using the EC2 instance user data, which I assume comes from sort of the cloud init terminology. Yeah, it basically is, you know, whatever I think is the established way to describe, you know, sort of unmodified user data. That would be because that would be the most familiar term, right? If you're sort of looking, you know, reading, let's say, documentation about user data, et cetera, et cetera. So if plain text is the that's what people use, then that would be the right thing.
Yeah, I mean, we can always enrich, you know, the term with more wording around, like documenting what that actually means with more than 2 words in sequence. By saying, like, by clear text, we mean it's not being modified or encrypted in any way. And then if we actually, you know, change that assumption, we can always change the text. If we say unencrypted, we bind ourselves to just that name. And then if we change anything that goes through during that sort of reconciliation cycle, then, you know, it's harder to change that name because, you know, we're breaking an API at that point, or, you know, we need to you know, do some sort of hoops to change it. With regards to what is the standard for it, I don't know. I see Richard mentioned something about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe even, you know, if our meaning of it is slightly different, what we could do is just expand out on the comment here so that at least the meaning of what we're saying is plain text is included in the API docs.
Okay.
So we maybe just say a bit more explicit, maybe.
Yeah. I can add more context on the comments.
Yeah, that's another interesting point, though. What you're saying there, Daniel, is whether what are we referring to, the actual data within it, or actually how EC2 expects it. So that's the other.
Yeah, I mean, so we're really spending too much time on this.
Yeah.
It's the storage type. So the storage type is either S3 or it's user data. I'm not sure that it needs to be plain text. It's just we're using the user data, like, or we can even say maybe instance user data. Then that's very, that's like, it's very like we're not talking about user, because user data, right, as a term is like when you say user data, I think cloud init, right? Here it's ignition, but we're using the EC2. It's like the metadata field, right? The property EC2 instance user data. And of course, I think the term definitely comes from cloud init, like that was added because that's what cloud init called it originally many years ago. Anyway, so is it instance metadata? Yeah.
The instance metadata is something a little bit different.
Yeah.
Like, the metadata is an endpoint which you can query from within the instance to fetch information. That happens to be available in the instance metadata. So if you query the instance metadata endpoints, you can find the user data, but they are, like, I don't think they necessarily mean the same thing, right? So yeah, that was just a reply to Pike, I think. Sorry, it was not like to address your comment, Daniel. But yeah, I I see what you're saying here. Like the storage type is actually the user data storage in the instance is not like plain text user data. You're right. Like if we think about like storage from a storage perspective, like there is no such thing as plain user data, plain text user data storage. There is a user data field where we store things. So we could even go with user data or instance user data if people prefer.
That was your original thinking, wasn't it? Did you say it was, you originally called it user
Yeah, it was my
data?
original thinking, but then I was like, maybe we should make it extra clear in the name that we are storing it in plain text just for security reasons, to steer away people that just stumble on it and don't understand that is like a concern if you store things in clear text. But yeah, if people prefer, we can switch.
Yes, yeah, and that could be, like you say, if you did change it just to user data, it could still be, that subtlety could be cleared up by the comment, so
Yeah.
that it is in the API docs as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Cool. Any more on that topic?
Yeah, I think we're clear. I will just rename it and then I will ping on Slack again for review, and if you're happy with it, the docs are there, the tests are there, API changes, I'm adding comments.
Cool, sounds good. Brilliant. And I think we'll probably do like we said, we'll probably do a 2.4 release fairly soon. So we is this added to that milestone?
No, it doesn't look like, but yeah, if you're happy to add it to the next one, that'll be great.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, cool. Brilliant.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for that one. So that brings us to the end of the agenda. Does anyone have any last minute agenda items that they'd like to talk about? No, going once, going twice, 3 times. Okay, everyone. Well, thanks for joining today. We do normally do the after hours, but I think it's probably just a bit harsh to do it on the first one back in the new year. So yeah, we'll pause the recording here and see everyone again in 2 weeks' time.
Thanks for
joining,
hosting.
everyone. Yeah, no problem.
Thanks, folks.
And take care.
See you soon.